want to steer this in a couple different directions, if you
go.
don't mind. So the first one is I want to get down to kind of like the nuts and bolts of like how you guys look at an elite training program and what you do based on the data that we have, right? So one of the things that we've done a good job of, I think, is outside of like the science of physiology and the way that the body adapts is also the science of analytics, right? Like taking the data that we know that we've seen in the sport and then picking out and choosing what is tested most, what we need to make sure they work on, look at what the highest correlators are to winning in different sanctionals or at the games. So how do you guys look at that kind of data, or do you look at that kind of data?
Well, so I used to just be a leaderboard scoundrel. Like a scoundrel might not be the word, scavenger. I'd go into the
You are scoundrel.
I'd go into the leaderboard, and like, so Noah's first discussion that we had was right after his 2016 games, which he went 8th, and then 16th, I think, was his worst finish, and then we started.
We were there watching that.
And
I felt so bad for him that year.
So I sat down and I just like, all right, let's just mathematically go through the leaderboard and then try to see on your weaknesses. I would try to tie it to like, what's the training adaptation that leads you to not be good at this style of test? And then I would go through that analysis and be like, okay, well, this is what I think you need to work on, which often was in conflict with what the athlete wants to work on. Like Noah was always, I need to get stronger, I need to get stronger, I need to get stronger, because that's the thing that held him back when he was earlier in his career. And then I go through the tests and I'm like, well, if you really look at the test, that's not the thing that's holding you back. It's like the heavy-ish stuff when you have to do it under fatigue, the longer range running, the cyclical stuff, the strongman, like all of that stuff seems to be a bigger priority to me from a quantifiable perspective. That changed a lot when you and Becky built out that stats page. I think we've done a classroom continuing education piece on it and written a blog on it. And I think understanding, well, what's the volume tolerance that people have to have on the basic movements of CrossFit, what has been tested before, has really just governed me making sure that when I write a training program, so like right now, I'm writing Travis and Noah's training program, and I'm writing it with the understanding that they're going to the games. There's the understanding that the COVID situation is going on. So like Noah has some responsibilities to do at-home stuff, so he doesn't want to do too much cyclical work. So there's all these variables that go into place. And as I do it, there's a practical side of it. It's like, all right, I want them to compete every once in a while, but not too much so that they get burnt out. I want those tests to be kind of balanced between them. But I also have to take into consideration, as I'm writing this chaotic distribution of training and I'm making some progressions on their strength training, that the chaos, when I map it out over the course of a week, is touching the level of volume on the skills that they need to have polished that are definitely coming out. So that has helped me come up with a categorization system using the Brandon statistics, laying it out on basically the right-hand side of my weekly templates, and basically highlighting like, oh, I've done muscle ups this week. What's the volume? Cool, that's good enough. I can check it off the list. And I use it for them at the elite level more so as a checklist that I'm doing what's required for like the most important things. So
I think that's a good point. So one of the things that I've done recently is I've taken athletes who haven't qualified and got them qualified. And I think the subset of skills and the subset of movements that you need to train in order to take someone from not qualifying to qualifying is different than what you need to do when you have someone who they've already developed most of those skills to a really high degree.
So what you're saying real quick is just like someone that has to qualify in the open or just
or qualify through a sanctional who's never done it before. Like
so
they don't.
You're saying the movement selection is different in the open versus the games. That's what
and
you're trying to say.
For them, their season gets much more biased based on what's coming up. So like Cedric, for example, he is already qualified for the games. He qualified through the open. So he, we're assuming that it might be at a Romus or something like this. So running is a priority. And, some of the like more outdoor game style stuff is a priority for him. But for everybody else, the season has basically been completely reconfigured. And now the open is
the next target.
It's the next target.
Yeah,
and so for them, we have the distribution of all the movements that need to be hit. And for some of them, some of those movements are still weaknesses for them. So I almost have those, instead of in a chaotic pattern, I'm almost progressing those linearly, like using really basic linear progressions, not necessarily volume progressions, because most of those athletes at this point are already volume tolerant enough to do 120 chest to bar.
And they already move pretty well. Like it's just
about getting them to do it faster.
Yeah, it's such a different game at that level that it's almost non-practical to talk about for people other than the themes of what those people do. But a lot of it is in the assessment. For me, it's like, what are you doing? Where's your headspace? What do you want to work on? What do you like doing? Like, plays a big role. I mean, if I had my way, Noah would be doing hard assault bike, rowing, and loaded running work every day until he was good enough. But if I did that with him, he'd probably fire me as a coach.
See you later.
This is not fun. I'm done.
I want to do 20-minute normal general CrossFit stuff. Like, so there's a balance, right? There's a give and take of understanding. Like, yeah, there's a human element to this, and there's an amount of shitty stress that people are willing to take, no matter what the level is. Like, people say, like, I'll do anything to win. I'm like, yeah, you say that until like every day of your waking life is miserable and you're not enjoying what you're doing. Like, that happens to people if you're doing hard shit all the time. So it's an interesting process where I think it's the assessment for me is where I use that data and integrate it into the weekly structures.